Aldous Huxley was an English writer and philosopher. He wrote nearly 50 books. And here's his quote about history. That men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons of history. Welcome to the History Slices podcast, a mother-son duo discussing awesome bits of history. We prove on every show that history is not boring, entertaining, yet stimulating. This is History Slices. And now, here's your hosts, Jacob and Rachel.
Hello and welcome to History Slices podcast. This is Rachel.
And this is Jacob.
And Jacob, this is our 12th episode of the podcast.
Nice.
Yeah. And I remember, for those of you who have not heard our podcast before, in this podcast, we get to talk about fun pieces of history that Jacob chooses to talk about, whether it's a person or an event or something mysterious. He gets to choose something interesting to research, and then we discuss it. So welcome to the conversation. And Jacob, I remember that episode 12 is about Andrew Jackson.
Yes.
Yes. So what are we going to learn about him today?
Well, first of all, I'm curious, what do you know of him? Because obviously that's a name that's known.
Oh, boy. I could tell you what I know about him, and it'll take about 10 seconds. His face is on the $10 bill.
Yes.
He was a president.
Yes.
He may or may not have had a place in the military. I really don't know. That's about it. Yeah, a couple things.
Yeah. Well,
he may or may not have been handsome in his time. I don't know.
It depends on how you define handsome.
There you go. Very objective.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was our 7th president. So you're right about that. And he did indeed have a military background.
Okay.
So I wanted to talk a bit about this guy because I find him really interesting and very crazy. I don't necessarily mean that in a good way. I'm sure people like him and all that, and I don't want to beat on your guy or anything. But it's
the Andrew Jackson fan club.
Yes,
we're going to start getting
sure
notes.
100% exists somewhere. But no, he I don't know. He was just even for his time, which had kind of looser standards of what can fly. He was not a nice person and kind of crazy, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk about.
That's good. I'm interested to find out more. What are you talking about in his personal life, in his professional life, or both? So I'm interested to hear the details.
For the sake of brevity, because there's a lot of stuff, I'm going to talk about his early life, and I'm going to talk about his political career and kind of the controversies around him. Even today, he's pretty controversial figure.
Interesting.
Yeah, despite being dead for
But people still discuss. People still talk about him.
Yeah,
in a controversial way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm kind of going to skip a little bit over his military career. I'm going to touch upon it briefly, but just some stuff has to get cut just for the sake of time. If you, dear listener, are interested, look it up. It's a lot of fun, cool information is online, free to look at. So hopefully this inspires some people to be, that's interesting, and look more into it. Dig
in. Mm-hmm. Cool.
A lot of presidents, or I should say a lot of early presidents, were born in Virginia. The first, out of the first 4 of them were Virginians.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting to me. Andrew Jackson wasn't. He was actually born a little more south in Waxhaw settlement, which is between the Carolinas, north and south. Yeah, this was before the Revolutionary War. This was before independence.
Yeah.
So we were still a colony then, or
when he was born.
Colonies. When he was born, yeah.
But repeat the name for me.
Waxhaw.
Huh, interesting.
I believe that's how it's WAXHAW.
That seems very interesting word.
Yeah, it is. Sounds like a
So it sounds like something you're trying to say backwards.
It sounds like a product, it helps you save or something.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Or wax your axe handle or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. His parents were Irish colonists. They had arrived 2 years earlier. And I'm sorry, I should have said when he was born. It was March 15th, 1767.
1767.
So,
okay.
Yeah. 2 years earlier in 1765, his parents, who were Irish colonists, moved to the Americas. We're not entirely sure their exact journey. They probably landed in Philadelphia. He had 2 older brothers named Hugh and Robert. He was the baby. He was the baby,
and
of
there
the
were
bunch.
No sisters.
No sisters.
Okay.
He had kind of a rough go of it. He never knew his dad. 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I should say, before Andrew was born, his dad perished in like a logging accident or something. Yeah. And to give you a time of how different things were then, his dad was only 29.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like, yeah.
How sad.
You grew up quick then.
Yeah. And his mom just about to give birth to her third child. She must have been devastated on lots of levels.
Yeah. While he was a kid, like a young guy, he had a bit of a reputation for being a bit of a bully, a bit of a
scrappy.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like a polite word to say it. He bullied people, like other kids and stuff, and kind of had a quick temper and get like fly off the handle. Though I also read that he also was friendly with some people, like there was like a couple younger kids he took under his wing or whatever that means.
He was like maybe kind of protective of them.
Yeah. So a lot of people in, when you look back at this guy, they kind of, there's this thing where they kind of like say, oh, he was all bad. He was all just like a crazy like jerk. And he was, but I think he was also a little more nuanced than that.
Yeah, it seems like it would be difficult for somebody to get all the way to the office of the president and be, just not a good guy completely.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah.
But then again, like, I don't know, like this was a totally different time period.
Yeah,
so it's
still interesting. Okay, so rough and tumble childhood, which you can understand.
Yeah. And when the Revolutionary War started, he was still very young. And
well, what year did the Revolutionary War start?
Yeah, the Revolutionary War started 1775.
Oh, I was going to guess 74. So,
you're good.
And remind me just really, so he was just really like 10 or something like that?
Yeah, he would have been like 10.
Okay.
Which is like 14 in our time. Like they grew up fast.
Yeah, or 18.
Yeah. So in 1779, June 20th, during the Battle of Stoner Ferry, his older brother Hugh died. Like heat exhaustion or whatever. Like it was just poor conditions.
Okay, so he didn't die actually because of a battle wound.
And Andrew and Robert were, I can't remember if they were drafted or enlisted or whatever, but they ended up serving as couriers for General William Richardson Davie. I mean, they're just kids, so it's not like there's too many crazy stories. We know they were present during the Battle of Hanging Rock, which was like August 6th or so, I think, of that year. However, this is an interesting story. So in April 1781, he was about 14 at the time. Both him and his brother Robert ended up being captured by the British.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, basically they were like, okay, you're following orders now. You're like, helping around camp or whatever. Andrew, who has an attitude and doesn't like being told what to do.
So basically they're kind of prisoners of war and they were being used by the British to do whatever. Okay.
He didn't want to, I think it was like polish like an officer's boot or something like that. And he raised a stink about it and he got injured. They like, to punish him, like one of them like slashed him with a sword.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which gave him a scar. And his brother Robert, maybe inspired by Andrew, no, he did like the same thing, but the same thing happened to him because he's like, yeah, no, screw you. Anyway, so their mom kind of got them released, like see partition or something, or see like, when they got them, brought them home. However, they're both very weak, obviously, because they were malnourished. They were, a bit beat up.
Gosh.
And the final, because they're riding back on horseback, it's not like let's get in the car.
Yeah, right. So from wherever they were, where did you say in Philadelphia?
No, it was, I'm not sure where they were.
Yeah, but they were a distance with the British.
A distance, yeah. Home. And the final 2 hours was just a massive downpour.
Oh gosh. And imagine the strength of the mother. I just want to pause and say, so here's this young woman who has had to raise these 3 boys. I'm thinking, because you haven't mentioned it, maybe it is irrelevant, but she lost her husband, or at least her first husband, lost her oldest son.
I don't think she ever remarried. She might have, and I just missed that in my research.
And then she travels by herself to go fetch her other 2 boys and bring them home. Wow, so she was a strong woman.
She was, yeah. Unfortunately, probably thanks to the downpour and stuff, both brothers ended up getting smallpox.
Oh, wow. Because they were just weak.
They're just weak and just not...
vulnerable.
Well, yeah, they weren't, their immune system wasn't up, let's say. And Robert himself passed away soon after.
Oh,
right.
Tragic.
Yeah. Andrew, his mom nursed him back to health. You know, he was still kicking, but later on, not long after, might have even been in the same year or so, his mom did get cholera and passed away.
Oh my gosh.
So Andrew, at the age of 14, is an orphan, and he 100% blames the British. He hates the British.
Wow. Kind of understandably.
Yeah.
Kind of took almost his whole family.
Basically, yeah. So after the war, he ended up living with like relatives, like an aunt or whatever. But he was on bad terms with a lot of his extended family. I don't know the exact reason. It was probably something to do with his attitude, because again, he's like just he gets angry a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking he probably has a big chip on his shoulder about life kind of dealing him a bunch of lemons.
And his education was pretty sporadic because of that. Because he ended up being kind of shuffled around to like, I don't want him.
Yeah.
He got a couple jobs, but couldn't really hold one down. Like, he got a job at one point as like a saddle maker. That didn't work out. He got a brief job as a teacher. That really didn't work out.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I know. I feel bad for those kids. In 1784, he left the Waxhaws region or wherever it was. He spent his life, and he moved to Salisbury in North Carolina. There, he kind of started to study law, and eventually became like a lawyer, which is not too uncommon. Abraham Lincoln, before he entered politics, was a lawyer as well. I think, or not too uncommon, I should say. So it might have just been like one of those stepping stone things, because I can think of several other old time politicians that were lawyers in their past.
Yeah,
so.
I think that's a pretty common place to start.
Yeah,
you can kind of see why it's a sensible connection.
It makes sense.
It makes more sense than like a botanist or something, you know?
Yeah. It was around this time he got into his first duel with someone, which I know you loved the musical Hamilton.
the musical like lyrics have popped up several times in my head, but I haven't said anything. Yes. So he was in a duel.
Well, basically the reason why I don't want to cover all of them because there's a lot, but a reason why I kind of highlight this one is because it was like his first.
Okay.
And
but he dueled a lot, huh?
He
just had this inner anger.
And I'm going to get into this when we get to like kind of controversies of the man. He would, because at the time dueling was legal. It had rules and stuff.
You said it was legal.
It was legal. Okay. It had rules and stuff like that, but it was one of those things that like...
It was a way to settle disputes. Yeah. So it was legal. Okay.
And what he would do is he would, when someone annoyed him or he didn't like someone, like later on in life, what he would do is he got into this habit of ticking them off enough so that a duel was challenged, and then he'd just shoot them. So yeah, not a good guy. Not that kind of.
So instead of just outright shooting him, he would wait. He would. Yeah, I get your point.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Anyways, but this one was interesting because it was another lawyer that this happened with. There was a disagreement named. He has a weird name. Whitestill Avery. Avery. I don't know.
It's probably Avery, but the first name's really interesting.
Yeah, Waightstil. That's his first name.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know where that's from, but sure.
Do you think maybe it was Avery Waitstill? Like his last name, first name are flipped?
It's possible. If so, the source I was looking at was wrong,
okay.
But I don't.
Yeah, it seems more like it would be flipped, but Avery is also a last name too, so I don't know.
Who knows? Anyways, they hadn't reached an agreement beforehand, so they both fired in the air, which was kind of like because the reason
like a draw, kind of like
how duels work is that you have to stand still until both parties fire. So you can't just duck and dive out of the way, duck and roll, whatever.
So you had to stand still.
Yeah, because the idea is you both like shoot at the same time, and whoever's like got more of a true aim or whatever, that's kind of the idea. It really doesn't work, I think. There's a reason why it got like banned. Been like, no, you can't do this.
So they both shot into the air.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of was like that, the end of that disagreement, whatever it was. But it was like one of those things where it's interesting to compare this duel to his later duels because, well, we're going to get into another kind of famous example of a duel he partook in. But it was very honorable in a sense. Which, well, we'll get to it when we get to it, but let's just say that like his most infamous duel was involved in was not honorable. And I think people at the time were like, this isn't okay.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that. So in 1788, he moved to Nashville where he met his future wife named Rachel. Yeah, I know. And what's interesting, and this is a bit of a scandal at the time, I think it's something that nowadays is a little more not forgiving, but it's a little more like not as big of a deal. He and Rachel got together when Rachel was still married to her previous husband, which at the time was like a big no-no.
Well, that is still a big no-no.
No, it is. It is. But it's one of those things where like when they got married, Andrew and Rachel, the divorce with her previous husband was still in a process of going through. So what that meant was that legally their marriage wasn't binding. So he actually married her twice in order to make sure later on, in order to like make sure that was like, no, this is like a legal thing that's recognized. Mm-hmm. So 1791, again, this is kind of some historical context. That the year Tennessee became a state.
I was actually going to say, I was a little surprised that you said Nashville because Nashville seems like it doesn't seem like a very old city to me, but not that I know much about it. It's just a sense I have about the city.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I'm not sure when it was built. I can do a little.
So Nashville became Tennessee became a state.
Nashville became a state. Oh, geez. It was, Nashville was founded in the 1700s.
You mean Tennessee? Tennessee was founded in Nashville.
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. The 1700s. Okay. which is where we are. We're at the end of the 1700s. Yeah. So, okay. Go ahead. You were about to tell us when Tennessee became a state.
In 1791. And he was elected as that state's only representative at the time because they only had one. Yeah. And he was a Democrat Republican, which is, to like a modern person, their brain starts to melt out of their ears or they hear that term. It's basically like a it's basically just like a precursor to I don't know. American political history is confusing to me. Basically, it was just a party that used to be around.
Okay.
Thomas Jefferson was a Democrat Republican.
Okay.
To give an example of that. And in fact, the modern day Democratic Party, I think Andrew Jackson had a hand in kind of breaking away from the Democratic Republicans and kind of that kind of evolved into the Democratic Party of today. Though, of course, it's very different because of everything.
It's not a straight line. And
yeah,
a lot of
it never is. And that's what makes it kind of so tricky sometimes.
Yeah, very interesting.
Anyways, so he was a big critic of a lot of people, including George Washington, who at the time was beloved. He still is, of course, but because he believed George Washington had a political bias against Republicans or Democratic Republican, his party, and he wouldn't put any in Jackson's mind, at least he was putting as many of them in cabinet positions or positions of authority as he would have preferred. But there was other politicians that he was very much against. When John Adams was president, Jackson said that he was disgusted with him. His words, not mine. He was disgusted with this administration. Wow. And I'm like, wow, okay.
He was very opinionated.
He was very opinionated, and he was just very didn't care who knew. Yeah. Which is interesting. But it's
Can you share with us a reason why he was what about the Adams presidency he was disgusted by?
I'm not sure. Okay. It was probably just
I know that's a little out of focus of your topic, but I was just curious.
It was probably just some policy or he said something. But
he was very vocal about his opinion.
Yeah, and by 1797 he became a senator. Though he was atypical there as well. He didn't usually participate in debates. I guess maybe not his style. Maybe just because he just didn't I don't know. Maybe just being on a one-on-one yelling at someone as opposed to a group.
Yeah, debating is a bit of a sport. Yeah. It's challenging.
But he wasn't senator for long. The next year he resigned for, I'm assuming reasons. Like sometimes politicians will or people will resign from their current position in order to run for something else. And other times they resign because they're like, I'm done with this.
Yeah, there's a multitude of reasons.
You all. Yeah.
Yeah, but he only lasted about a year as a senator.
Only about a year as senator. But Tennessee, they liked him. He was pretty popular in his home state. Well, it wasn't where he was born, but his home state. And he got elected to the Tennessee Supreme Court. But due to health issues, he had to resign in 1804. So even in politics, he's kind of like not lasting long in jobs. But he's getting pretty, he's noteworthy, he's a senator. He was a member of the state's court,
So he's got getting some traction there on his resume.
Yeah.
But were his health issues short-lived, I guess, or... Because if he went on to be president, he must have still had those health issues.
Yeah, I think it might have been one of those scenes where everyone had health issues then, know. And I think it might have just been that whatever it was didn't kill him. And I'm not sure if it was stuff that bothered him later or not. There is one thing we're going to get into in a bit, but there's one thing that is that can't be good for your body.
Wow.
But we'll get into that. At one point, Jackson, he posted an article about a rival of his, John Sevier, I don't know, Sevier, who I think they were running against each other or something like that. They're rivals. But in the article, he accused Sevier, whatever, his rival, of fraud, basically accepting bribes, that type of stuff. Sevier, in return, publicly insulted him. Not insulted. I have to not slur my words with some of these. A duel nearly happened. It didn't, but it was to give you an idea of how volatile this guy was. Is that he started that, and it's just I don't know, stuff like that. It was just when reading up about him, one gets the distinct impression that he was not a fun person to be around.
Yeah, he liked to poke the bear all over the place.
Yeah.
Annoy people and
So. He participated in the War of 1812. I'm not going to get too much into it because that's a whole nother topic that's deserving of its own, its own episode. Basically, he was a major general during that war and participated in the Battle of New Orleans, where he put the city on martial law. A few men, I don't know how many, it was a number, not too many, but not too little. It was probably
something notable.
Yeah, 4 to 12, something like that.
Okay.
A few of his men were executed on his orders because they tried to desert during the thing, which at the time no one knew about, no one cared about. But later on, when he was running for president, it became more of a way to, it kind of got dug up and used against him. Yeah. He also, and this is interesting, I didn't know this because, again, he's stereotyped as being this really terrible slave owner, which he is, but he got controversy at the time for giving equal wages to both white and black soldiers, which... That
was controversial.
That was, yeah. So in that one moment, he was progressive.
Yeah, I'm thinking back. My brain's taking a minute to catch up to what you said about executing those.
Oh, I'm
people.
sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I just didn't want to interrupt. But the execution of those, I wonder if that was common practice in order to keep soldiers kind of in line.
I don't know if it was common practice.
Or if that was unusual.
Yeah, I don't know if it was common practice then. I think it was more common than... Obviously, we don't do it now, but I mean, in countries that might still do that now, or places that might still do it now. I think... Generally speaking, worldwide, that practice was a little more common.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
Yeah, so I was just trying to compare him, in the backdrop of history.
Of the time, yeah.
Yeah, what others were doing. So, and then the thing about paying. So if he was paying whites and black, were they servants or because
they were soldiers?
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. For some reason, I was thinking because you said slaves. He was a slave owner, but then I missed that part.
He didn't pay his slaves anything.
I was thinking about the other thing. So, okay, so there were white and black soldiers, and he paid them the same wage.
Yeah, which at the time was a big controversy thing.
Okay, I'm sorry. Catching up to you now, Jacob.
Sure.
I gotcha.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. I didn't mean to barrel on ahead without you.
No, that was all me. So, okay, that's interesting.
About the executing deserters, it was controversial enough that it was used as ammo against him when he ran for president. So it wasn't the popular thing, regardless of if it was more common or not.
Okay.
Anyways, so he also fought in the First Seminole War, and the reason I bring it up is one, he has a real hate on for Native Americans. Like he really will get into what he did during his presidency, but he really did not like them.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting because we used to live in Florida in Seminole County.
Yeah.
So
well, we didn't live in Seminole County, actually.
We
Seminole
lived near
County,
Seminole City.
yeah.
I always confuse it too.
Seminole County is a different spot, but yeah, and there's a lot I don't know about that Seminole War and how Florida became state and all that interesting stuff. But
I'm not going to talk about it.
No, that's fine.
I mean, I'm not opposed to talking about it. This is one of those things that it's like
too far deviating.
It's too far in the weeds. Yeah.
So that's really interesting that he participated in that. Okay.
Yeah. He became president in 1829. And he lasted in office until 1837, so a little while.
Okay.
And his main thing, because a lot of the stuff I read about is like kind of not boring, but kind of like, I don't know how interesting that is for to say, like it was like he supported this, someone's against that and stuff. It's like a typical politician stuff.
Yeah.
But there is a few interesting points, one of which anyone who has a basic understanding of American history knows I'm about to talk about. But the first one, I'm going to talk about the minor one and then the bigger one. His reaction to abolitionists, which I'm sure you know, but for anyone who doesn't, that was a movement at the time to do away with slavery, which is a hugely complicated issue. But basically, the nutshell version is that the southern states had a lot of plantations and their economy relied on slaves. Well, the northern states were more industrialized and their economy didn't. And there was like a friction between like trying to one up each other, basically, and worry that if one side, this is all the lead up to the Civil War, which happens way later on in the timeline. These are the seeds. Basically, there's a worry that like, if one side got too much of a voice or too much of it, because for the longest time, every new state that got him into the Union was either like, free state, slave state, free state, slave state. It was like a teeter-totter back and forth. And eventually it just fell out and it just became way more free states and slave states. But there's worry that like one side would make either the slavery or the banning of slavery constitutional, which they didn't want. So that's a whole nother thing, but basically that's kind of the political hot button issue of the time.
And so where did Jackson
he did not like them, abolitionists.
Okay.
I mean, he was also anti-secession, which is something, but not that was necessarily on the table at the time, but he was pro-slavery.
Okay, pro-slavery, but he wanted to keep everybody together. Like, I mean, not like you said, it was a little premature to say that.
Yeah,
they were
no one was
division, but
throwing around that word just yet, the I word, just yet, which is usually how it is in history. Whenever like you see a breakaway, it's usually like it's not early. It's usually like far after things have gone, like sideways. Yeah. The main thing in his presidency and something that he is most controversial for today is the Trail of Tears, which is a very heavy subject. It lasted from 1830 to 1850, like past his presidency. The basic gist of it, because I don't want to get too much into the details, but it's a reason why like there's been participants and people being like, do we really want him on our money? Stuff like that. Like the thing that people have a real problem with, and I think rightly so, is he forcefully relocated a bunch of Native Americans off their land and into designated areas. Thanks to exposure, disease, and starvation, thousands died. And he'd been in favor of this for at least a decade before his presidency. Like this is something that he was like really pushing for a while. And I don't mean to like bring the mood down or anything, but it's like a real, it's a real kind of black spot in American history.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to jump ahead.
Sure.
But if he is such a bad guy, like you're painting this picture, which, I'm not disputing at all.
Of course.
But what is it about Andrew Jackson that got him on the $10 bill? Like, why wasn't a different president selected to?
Probably because
I know that's probably a question that you didn't think about looking at, but I'm just wondering.
I imagine it might have been like just his efforts during like his military career and his contributions to like politics or whatever. I don't believe it was because of
I'm sure it's just that, like, you started out this conversation saying, you know, everybody's a blend really of bad and good,
of course,
and so there must be something.
Problem is, not to take away from what you're saying, because I agree completely. Everyone is like, the world isn't in black and white. Mm-hmm. It would be very easy if it was, and we could just find those people and put them in like under lock and key. But doesn't work like that. Some people are better than others, I guess. This was my kind of thought.
Gosh, yeah. And that's really, we're just really getting into some
like the schematics and the ethical debates of stuff.
Huge. And so I was just curious how he managed to get on the 10 if other people might have been also, you know, worthy candidates. But that would be an interesting thing too, just discovering the history of the money, you know.
Yeah,
but anyway, so Trail 2 is to get you back on track.
It does change, like that Hamilton musical I mentioned earlier, maybe you heard of it, is they were going to take Hamilton off that just because he was more obscure, and you know, but then the musical hit and everyone loved him. They're like, okay, I guess we'll leave him on, you know. So it's interesting. That's like the big controversial thing. I want to talk about some of the other things he was known for and kind of why it's controversial. First of all, I want to talk about, maybe I should say, no, I'll get to it. I'm kind of hinting at this before. This is his duel with Charles Dickinson, I think. Not that guy, not the author, but like a different guy with the name. I just now realize he has the same name. Anyways.
I think it's Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
So it's maybe slightly different. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Dickinson. Yeah. Anyways, 1806, a little while ago. Well, obviously, but I mean, you know, in terms of like the story.
Before his presidency.
Yeah. Dickinson posts a smear piece on Jackson in a local newspaper, basically saying this guy, he's a thug, he's a jerk, screw him, you know. Yeah. Jackson, of course, challenged Dickinson to a duel. Here's the thing. Dickinson was notoriously good at duels. Like, that's something that it was known as, like, he forever. So this
Dickinson guy, he found himself in enough duels to have a reputation of being good.
Yeah. So they're probably kind of similar. Yeah. But Jackson, what he did, and I don't know if this was a stroke of genius or madness, like 1,000 IQ play or something, but he, when they turned, Jackson waited for Dickinson to shoot him, and he got hit in the chest so close to his heart that the bullet could not be removed. And that's why I'm saying that, like, that can't be good for your body.
Wow.
But because you have to stand still until both parties fire, Dickinson can only stand there, as Jackson then, like, carefully took his aim and killed him, which is murder.
Wait, so the Dickinson guy fired first.
Yes.
Jackson waited for him to fire.
Mm-hmm.
And the bullet hit Jackson, and Jackson still stood there and then shot Dickinson.
Yes. A lot of people were pretty outraged.
But why didn't he just shoot? That doesn't make sense. Why didn't he just shoot? Like when Dickinson shot and just kill him then?
Because he wanted to make sure that, like, he hit the guy. He wanted to like take his time and like make sure that normally in a duel is this like you shoot at the same time and it's harder to like.
So you turn around, like you're walking away from each other to begin with, and then you spin around and you shoot.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to aim because they're like crappy 1800s guns.
Well, that, and you're kind of getting your bearings. Okay, so not to get too technical on that. I was just a little bit confused as to why.
No, it's fine. Basically, he basically tanked a bullet in order to rig the game in his favor, kind of, in that sense.
Interesting.
Which, I mean, that's badass that he managed to survive being shot and was just like, Theodore Roosevelt, a similar thing happened to him where he got shot by some guy and then gave a speech right after because he's just like, a bullet's not going to stop me.
Wow.
So weak bullet. No, but a lot of people were not okay with how this duel went down. It really messed with his reputation, and he had to really climb back in order to like get
interesting,
like get more into people's favor, which of course he did because he became president after. But that was like kind of in terms of duels, like putting aside his decisions as a leader, his in terms of duels, that's the most like kind of infamous one.
So it was dishonorable and whatever. Interesting.
Another one, and I've kind of also touched upon this a little bit, he was a plantation owner, which, to be fair, was not uncommon at the time, but it was also, he was known for being very cruel to his slaves,
which seems to contradict how he paid his soldiers. That's
again, it's one of those things where it's like, we don't know his reasons for that. It could very well be he just didn't care enough to bother with like trying to figure out like who gets what money and just like whatever, you all get equal. Or it could have been like maybe he, I don't know, was like more mellow at one point. He was a cruel slave owner. He had up to 300 slaves, including women and children, which again, pretty normal at the time. The slave quarters were slightly larger than average at 400 square feet.
Well, his what was?
Slave quarters.
Slave quarters.
They were slightly larger than average at 400 square feet. He whipped them in order to increase productivity and to punish people. And when some would escape, which was, again, pretty common, there's the Underground Railroad and stuff. And I think legally at the time, like Southern like bounty hunters and people who catch escaped slaves could enter the North and get them back.
Oh, wow.
I think that was part of the compromise. Yeah, because there's a lot of compromises between like,
try to keep things.
Yeah, like California wants to be a free state. Well, we're also going to have this thing now, whatever. And he offered extra money if someone would beat them before returning them. Like he's like, you'll get another couple hundred if you whip them first, which is pretty horrendous. So yeah, he was a pretty wrathful man who killed a lot of people, and well, it did make people take him seriously, and I'm sure some people loved him for it. It made him a lot of enemies, both in life and afterlife. Like afterlife, you know what I mean? Both after he passed away, right. And even now, there's still petitions from some people to like, we should get his portrait removed from the White House or whatever, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with. I mean, I understand the sentiment and where they're coming from, and I don't want to get all on my soapbox or anything, because Lord knows that'll just turn ugly. But I think if you really want to, I'm trying to think how to say this, you don't want to pretend it didn't happen.
Right.
It
seems like the best thing to do is to learn about who these people were and make a judgment.
Yeah.
But leave history be history, like what happened, but just learn from it.
What happened. Yeah, absolutely. As long as you learn from it and
who people were.
To repeat it. Yeah. Right. I just thought he was a very interesting figure. He eventually he passed away from heart failure. I wonder why.
Yeah.
But
it's a little close.
June 8th, 1845, and it was in Nashville. So,
1845, okay.
Yeah. He was 78.
Okay. So he actually lived to be a pretty good...
Yeah, he was a grizzled old buzzard by the end of it.
My goodness. Super interesting.
I thought he was an interesting figure to cover.
Yeah.
One, just because he's such a character.
Yeah.
And he's almost like... unbelievable. You would not believe this person A existed, B was in like an office of power. You know what I mean? Like historically relevant.
It's a little bit surprising that just given what you said about who he was and how volatile he seemed to be and hair trigger and all that kind of stuff, that it's a very interesting life. It does make me want to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's another reason I picked him, is because he's a name. When people talk about past presidents, from like Jefferson to Lincoln, most people don't know them. They're just not, in terms of his history, like they're just not as like no one really knows too much about James Garfield. You know what I mean? or the most people know about William Henry Henderson is that he was like president for like a week and then died of sickness, and John Tyler took his, was the first vice president. Yeah. But Henderson was so old. He had such a long political career beforehand. No one knows about that. All they know about is like, he's the president that instantly died.
Wow.
So I thought, and people do know about Andrew Jackson, probably because of who he was and his attitude towards things. I don't know how much is popularly known, so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of discover it.
I think that was a really good pick. I really enjoyed hearing you tell me about Andrew Jackson, and I definitely learned some things. Yeah, that's really good. So you actually answered the question I had, which was, what was it about Andrew Jackson that made you, like, how did he stand out to you as somebody to pick? So you just answered that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Jacob, awesome job.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope our audience enjoyed it as well. Yeah. I know it's a little kind of a scatter side here. It's hard to pick like where for brevity's sake, it's hard to like pick like, okay, well, what's relevant and what isn't.
What should I put in here? Yeah, I think you did a great job doing that.
If you're more curious about this guy or any president, really, I urge you, go online, look the stuff up. It's fascinating. If you're interested in history, you won't regret it.
Yeah. And sometimes even if you don't know that you're interested in history.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. So I go into next time or?
Yeah, please do. So this has been episode 12. Let's hear what's coming up in episode 13.
Yeah, it's another historical figure.
Good. I can I say just really quick, I enjoyed the historical figure part, especially since we've talked about so many unexplained mysteries and unsolved mysteries and things like that. So I really enjoyed the tone or whatever. That's not even right, but I enjoyed this episode a lot. So historical figure.
I'm glad.
Episode 13.
Yep. And maybe you've heard of this guy. He's pretty famous, but what is not as famous is kind of his story, or not so much the story, but what happened to him.
Okay.
I'm, of course, talking about my favorite artist, Vincent van Gogh.
Awesome. Okay. Excellent, Jacob. Well, we're looking forward to hearing about Vincent van Gogh on episode 13. And listeners, thank you so much for being there with us today as we got to learn about Andrew Jackson. Remember, if you've enjoyed yourself and been entertained at all, please let your friends know. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Confucius once said, "Study the past if you would define the future." You've been listening to the History Slices podcast with Jacob and Rachel. We hope you've gotten some useful information from the show. We hope we made you think, and we hope you were entertained. We know we had fun, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook at History Slices and on Instagram at History Slices Podcast. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. And tell a friend about the show. That'll help us out too. One more quote before we go from Michael Crichton. If you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know it's part of a tree. Till next time, this is History Slices, signing off.